Hello, and welcome to the next installment in the Law & Order video series. In this one, we'll be looking at Techland's 2015 zombie epic, Dying Light. Having previously released Dead Island, Techland introduced free running into the mix, creating a more fast-paced and frantic experience, especially at night. Now, 7 years later, with the release of Dying Light 2 only a few weeks away, this is the perfect time to jump back into the story of Dying Light. That being said, there will be spoilers in this video, so please be aware of that. The global relief effort, known as the GRE, airdropped one of their agents, Kyle Crane, into the Turkish city of Harran, where a mysterious viral outbreak has occurred. This viral outbreak turns people into aggressive zombies. The reason behind Kyle's mission is that a Kadir Suleiman, also known as Rais, has stolen a file which contains sensitive subject matter, using it to blackmail the GRE. There is a specific reason that Rais hates the GRE, but we will get to that later. Kyle, who is unaware of the contents of the file, completes his airdrop, but his parachute gets caught on an awning. After getting free, he is confronted by 3 goons from Rice's gang, one of which is his enforcer, Tahir. Kyle fights them off, but fires his gun, which alerts a large group of infected towards them, and Kyle is bitten and infected. Kyle is rescued by a runner called Jade Aldemir and her boyfriend Amir, who dies. Jade takes Kyle to a local sanctuary called the Tower, where he meets a young man called Rahim Aldemir, Jade's younger brother, who teaches Kyle the basics of parkour. During this, Kyle starts showing the first signs of infection and has a seizure. He fights through it and eventually reaches Rahim again, who tells him to go and see a Dr. Zira, who will give Kyle a shot of what's known as antizin, a suppressant which will help keep the virus at bay. After learning that Zira is researching a cure, Kyle speaks to Spike, the quartermaster, and he learns that Rice has been stealing all of the antizin airdrops the GRE is dropping into Harran, and Rice is using the antizin to extort survivors in the city. Spike says there is another antizin drop at sunset, but he needs Kyle to arm some traps to keep the tower's leader Brecken safe while he collects the antizin, because at night, well, it's pretty dangerous. Kyle sets the traps and goes to meet Brecken at the tower. Brecken, however, has been wounded after his group of runners were killed by infected. Brecken was attacked by Rice's thugs and has suffered a concussion, meaning that he cannot go and get the airdrop. Brecken mentions that if they fail, they will end up having to go to Rice and beg for the antizin. Kyle volunteers and makes his way to the drop. He radios into the GRE to tell them that he has intercepted the GRE's antizin drop. They tell him to do the unthinkable, to destroy it all, but to keep one for himself. They want Kyle to destroy it in order to force a meeting with Rice, but only to confirm his identity. That their plan focuses on the greater good. Kyle reluctantly destroys the antizin and lies to Jade, telling her that the antizin is gone. As it's night, Kyle is chased by what are known as volatiles, enhanced infected that only venture out at nighttime. He manages to make it back to the tower. The group are debating who should go to Rice and ask for the antizin. Kyle offers to go as Rice doesn't know what he looks like or who he is. He makes it to Rice's compound. He meets Rice, confirming his identity, and then meets Karim, Rice's quartermaster, and after making Kyle complete some fairly unethical tasks, Rice screws him over and wants him to do yet another task, obviously hoping that Kyle will die in the process, and he'll give him 2 crates of antizin instead of 1. After getting ambushed and completing this, Kyle approaches Rice, who screws Kyle over yet again, only giving him 5 vials of antizin instead of the 2 crates he promised. Rice tells Kyle to deliver Jade to him as he wants her to fight in an arena for his gang's entertainment. He contacts the GRE to tell him this and that he's no longer going to work with Rice, but the GRE try to guilt trip him by telling him how important this file is to them. They order Kyle to deliver Jade to Rice, so Kyle, in response, cuts ties with the GRE. He tells Jade the bad news in regards to the antizin, but doesn't tell her what Rice has asked him to do. He goes back to the tower, and Brecken has realised that the GRE has halted all antizin drops. In need of antizin, Kyle and Jade raid the facility which Rise uses as a storage facility, but don't find any antizin. They do, however, find a lot of plastic explosives. A few hours later, Rahim has used the explosive they found to try and blow up a volatile nest, despite Kyle before warning him not to do it. It's gone horribly wrong. Kyle meets Raheem, but he's badly injured, saying he's been cut. Kyle goes to blow up the nest and returns, but Raheem was actually bitten. He's turned and Kyle has to kill him. Back at the tower, Jade overhears a conversation between Kyle and Brecken and discovers her brother is dead. She runs off, but a large explosion is heard. Rice's thugs have kidnapped Dr. Zera. Kyle goes after him and finds him, but gets captured by Rice too, who stabs Zera in the leg and throws Kyle into a pit and makes him fight multiple infected. Kyle survives, and Rice reveals that he knows he is working for the GRE. Rice tells his men to publish and leak the file anyway. He reveals that the GRE are planning to weaponize the virus for profit, the plans of which are on the file. Rice orders his guards to kill Kyle, but he kills them first, and Kyle chops off Rice's hand.
Kill him.
However, in the skirmish, Zera is stabbed in the chest and dies. Before his death, he told Kyle that he has given Jade his research to deliver to a Dr. Camden in the Old Town part of the city. Crane then finds that the Defense Ministry has plans to firebomb the entire city. Their plan is to contain the outbreak and destroy it, and then eventually claim there are no survivors remaining. He hooks up with a group in Old Town and tries to bring attention to the world that there are survivors in Haran. He sets off a series of explosions in an apartment block which outline a sad face. However, a jet flies over the city and fires a missile at it, destroying the sign. It's obvious that they are blatantly aware that there are survivors in the city. Kyle, in one last act of desperation, climbs a radio tower and activates a signal, which allows people to find out that there are survivors in Haran, which puts a stop to the firebombing plan. The GRE gets in touch with Kyle again and order him to retrieve Zera's research on the cure. In exchange, they will extract him from Haran. Kyle then finds out that Rice has captured Jade. He finds her, but finds out that she's been bitten and is turning into an infected. Rice cruelly gives them one shot of antizin, forcing them to choose who they want to save. Jade chooses to save Kyle and she turns, and Kyle unfortunately has to kill her. Distraught and furious, Kyle fights with and kills Tahir.
That's what you deserve.
Yes? Then why don't you?
Because you're not the kind of loose end you leave untied.
Kyle now has the tissue samples Jade was delivering to Dr. Camden. He delivers them, and Dr. Camden says that he is close to a cure, but he needs the rest of Zera's data, which of course is in the hands of Rice. Kyle finds out that Rice has struck up a deal with the GRE. In exchange for extraction from Haran, he will give them the data. Kyle cannot let this happen, so he confronts Rice and eventually kills him. A GRE helicopter appears, but Kyle decides to defy the GRE and deliver the data to Camden, vowing to stay and help the remaining survivors in Haran. Camden says that he's certain a cure is within reach. The main portion of the game ends there. Now, whether or not you believe that the main game's ending was final and that the following's ending was actually canon or not is a highly divisive topic, but the devs seem to have confirmed that it is actually canon. Now, I'll be covering my theory on why I think the following is canon in a separate video, but for now, let's look at what happened in the DLC. It's a bit bizarre, but please stick with me. Following on from the main events of Dying Light, after staying in Haran to help the survivors, Kyle and Lena, the medic from the tower, encounter a mortally injured survivor who tells them there are people out there who don't get infected, even if they are bitten, and refers to someone called the Mother. Dubious but desperate after Camden's researchers hit a brick wall, and down to their last few vials of antizin, Kyle goes to check it out and journeys to the countryside. Kyle quickly discovers that the survivors in the countryside have converted to a cult who call themselves the Children of the Sun, who themselves worship the figure referred to before as the Mother. Kyle aids the survivors around the countryside in order to get an in with the cult and learn more about this immunity. The high-ranking members of this cult, called the Faceless, eventually trust Kyle enough to disclose to him that it's nothing supernatural, but is in fact a special elixir that acts pretty much the same as antizin, but that it isn't a cure. The Faceless do reveal though that they are working on a cure themselves, and that if Kyle helps them, he can take it back to Haran with him. They put Kyle in touch with a man named Attila, who is a dying man working on a project for the Mother. Attila tells Kyle that the Mother is called Jasmine. She was the wife of a military colonel who had a hand in the experiments that caused the initial outbreak and was bitten and died. Attila passes a code to Kyle that the colonel gave him. Attila commits suicide hoping to invoke a Child of the Sun prophecy, but it fails. Kyle finds out that Rice's thugs are still operating and have travelled to the countryside in search of the cure themselves. They attempt to attack a nearby dam, which is the mother's base, but when Kyle gets there, everyone is dead. Kyle discovers something shocking.
Back home, and the light brought me back. You see, breathing the fumes is one thing, but drinking the liquid is something else entirely.
The mother removes her mask, and she is a volatile. However, she is completely sentient, aware and passive in the day, but violent and feral when night comes. The mother reveals to Kyle that the military operation and experiments were located in the dam, and that it was the location of the substance, or their elixir. This substance, however, was nowhere near a cure. In fact, it turns people into sentient volatiles instead. The mother states that the only way forward now is to summon the god of the sun. Psst, she means a nuke, and not an actual sun god. Now this is where Kyle has a choice to either do what the mother says, using Attila's code to launch the nuke, which is the military failsafe in case the virus got out, killing everyone in Haran, survivors and infected, and eradicating the virus. Or to defy the mother. If Kyle chooses to defy her, she will force Kyle to drink the elixir. He fights her and kills her. He grabs the rest of the vials and leaves the dam. He starts suffering blackouts and entering an area outside of the city with no infected. Kyle realizes that he's turned into a volatile. He sees a family playing in the park and lets out a scream. Kyle Crane is gone. Now that's the end of the following, but for now let's focus on the finer aspects of the story, starting with Rais. Kadir Suleiman, or Rais, was a colonel in the military who, when the outbreak kicked off, was tasked by the GRE to maintain order in Haran. He was also initially ordered to protect doctors Zera and Camden whilst they researched a cure. In exchange, Suleiman requested that they extract his brother Hassan, a paraplegic, out of the city. The Ministry of Defense, however, refused, and Hassan was eventually killed by infected. Filled with rage towards the GRE and their part in the death of his younger brother, he abandoned his post and left Zera and Camden to fend for themselves and reinvented himself as Rais, a ruthless warlord forming a violent gang, taking control of Haran's quarantine zone and stealing a sensitive file from the GRE codenamed Tempest. He would go on to steal airdrops, attack people, extort people, and hoard supplies in his garrisons. The GRE, or the Global Relief Effort, is a humanitarian organisation affiliated to the Ministry of Defence. They are the group that airdrop relief packages and medical supplies, etc., into Haran's quarantine zone. After the theft of the sensitive file stolen by Kadir Suleiman before sending Kyle Crane, they initially sent Amir Qureshi into the city. Now some of you will remember that Amir is the man who saved Kyle alongside Jade at the start of the game. After Suleiman abandoned his post protecting Zera and Camden, Amir was tasked with helping them both escape the city, but they actually got separated, which is why Zera is working in the slums and Camden is stranded all the way in the lab in Old Town. Anyway, the GRE sent Kyle shortly afterwards. The GRE didn't know whether Rais was in fact Suleiman, but they had their suspicions, which is why they sent Kyle. Kyle is informed by Rais of what is on the file, and it's revealed that the file refers to the GRE's plans to weaponize the virus and to sell it for profit. This did get out in the end when Rais leaked the contents of the file to the world.
An internal global relief effort document surfaced today that, if verified, implicates the GRE in a far-reaching criminal conspiracy. Instead of trying to find a cure for the Haran virus, according to the file, the GRE had plans to weaponize it and sell it to the highest bidder.
The GRE then panicked and tried to save face and asked Kyle to get Zera's research, not so that they could make a cure, but so that the public would think that they were making a cure. The GRE were also basically the only thing stopping the Ministry of Defense from firebombing the city, but then the GRE began to lose control, the ministry took over and commenced with their plan of bombing. Kyle Crane is from Chicago, Illinois, and at some point he served in the armed forces, which explains his extensive combat abilities. He began work as a mercenary, which is how he ended up working for the GRE. Crane starts off pretty calm, but after the loss of Dr. Zera, Rahim and Jade, he seems to get angrier and more bitter with each death, and this is perfectly captured during his interaction with Rais on top of his tower.
Do it! Fuck you, asshole. You want me to make my own rules? Rule number 1, you're gonna spend the rest of your goddamn life in fucking agony.
He really hurts from the losses of Jade and Raheem in particular. At the start of the following, it shows him being plagued by visions of the infected states of them both attacking him. He eventually develops a bond with the survivors, feeling like he has a duty to protect them, and hence why he went off to the countryside in search of a cure. I didn't really know how I felt about Kyle Crane's fate. I was conflicted. The reason I had mixed feelings about it was that I also figured that Kyle Crane was kind of doomed anyway. I mean, Camden was in reality nowhere nearer to finding a cure, and they had basically run out of antizin, so it's likely that Kyle would have eventually turned at some point anyway. The Haran virus is described as a rabies-like virus by Dr. Zira, spread through bodily fluids, which caused an epidemic, later becoming a pandemic. The true nature of the virus or its origin is actually really mysterious. As mentioned earlier in the following, Attila reveals that the husband of Jasmine, who of course is the mother, who is a colonel, was involved in the experiments associated with this virus, but then an outbreak occurred. This indicates that the military are solely responsible for the outbreak. Now, the dam in the countryside was a military facility which held the elixir that the Children of the Sun held in such high regard. It's quite possible that this elixir was used on test subjects who got loose and escaped into the countryside, later entering into Haran and infecting the entire city. The first weeks and days of the outbreak is explored in the Dying Light novel, titled Nightmare Row, which follows the story of Mel Wyatt, an athlete set to compete in the Haran Olympic Games, which of course is around the same time that the outbreak hit the city. The reality is that the outbreak had already started to hit the city weeks before the games even started. The hospitals were already busy with sick patients. At the same time, the city was still pushing for the games to go ahead regardless of this new mysterious disease and the rising murder rates and reports of missing people. I'll be discussing the fuller details of the outbreak in a future video. Anyway, the virus, or rather the host, hates and reacts badly to UV light. Quite why is another mystery. As we see in The Walking Dead, after Herschel gets bitten and they remove his affected limb, saving him, the same applies here, as politician Errol Asani's leg was amputated by Kareem, who worked as his bodyguard prior to the outbreak, saving him from infection. Now we can see the many stages of infection and certain unique mutations throughout Haran. The first stage and early infection point is a viral. These infected are still fast and give chase. They still seem semi-aware of themselves at points, as when they are attacked they occasionally cower and plead for mercy, then the virus takes over again and they continue attacking. They choose not to bite, but only to beat, pummeling the victim until they pass out or are dead. Not long after this, the viral will degrade and become a biter. This is the most common form of infected. They're slow during the day, ambling around, but can show bursts of speed when they lunge for their prey. They can show moments of turning back into virals. Now these are the two most common, however there are specific mutations. These are toads, which spit toxic acid, bombers, which as their name suggests explode, goons who are 7 foot tall but very slow, demolishers, which are the largest type of infected, screamers, which are simply infected children, bolters, which are not aggressive at all but they just feed and hide, and volatiles, which we will discuss further. Volatiles and how they came about, or came to be even, are a little bit different than other infected. They are recently infected humans who, before turning, seem to have been integrated into a nest. The best case of this is a guy called Sabit in the following. His hut was situated above a hive, or a nest, and he was taken by volatiles, and at one point, Kyle finds him down there in the process of turning. Volatiles only come out at night due to a more extreme case of UV sensitivity. There are two types of volatiles though, depending on how evolved they are. There are bigger volatiles seen here, and then there are alpha or evolved volatiles, which tend to be bigger with a higher damage resistance and can detect if a survivor is using zombie guts to camouflage themselves to blend in. And then there is of course the Night Hunter, which I guess is the most badass of all the infected. The Children of the Sun, who also go by the following, are a cult whose origins stretch way back to the mid-13th century. Now this note states that the exact roots of their existence are murky at best. Considered to be a tribe of hunter-gatherers, they decided to settle after finding land suitable for growing crops. Over the years, their numbers appeared to decline. Now the mother in this story was Jasmine, but the mother was a figure who existed long before. referred to as a spiritual guide or a shaman, she would put members of the tribe in a trance. They interpreted forces of nature as heavenly power. They worshipped the sun and saw the wind as a messenger of heaven. These beliefs made their way into the traditions of the Children of the Sun. They developed bizarre burial rituals. Instead of burning the bodies of their dead, they would leave them out in the open so that their bodies could be exposed to the sun and wind. Birds would feed on the corpses, but that was okay according to the Children of the Sun, as the birds were seen as symbols of heaven's mercy. Over the years, the Children of the Sun blended into society. It's mentioned here that the mother's importance as their shaman diminished, as she had now led them to the area in which they would settle, and therefore her visions were no longer needed. But she did remain a spiritual leader. The locals, however, had a very different opinion of the mother. Since they existed in those lands before the Children of the Sun arrived, the locals saw her instead as a witch or a hag. Fast forward to the Haran outbreak, and the mother's significance grew exponentially once again. As we know, Jasmine became the mother and stoked up an interest in these beliefs. The children held the God of the Sun in such high regard. The God of the Sun will descend from heaven in order to purge the earth of the plague's poison, and it will be the mother that will bring the God of the Sun to the earth. Seem familiar? But this God of the Sun was essentially a nuke, which decimated the entire city of Haran, of course depending on your chosen ending. So we have a fair few characters who were simply caught in the wrong place at the wrong time in the game. We'll look at a few here and what they were doing when the outbreak actually hit. The leader of the survivors in the tower, Harris Brecken, is a British man down on his luck and pretty much skint, living in his own words, epoxy flat. He was a parkour instructor, which is a key reason why the survivors in the tower knew parkour and why they became runners in the city. Brecken was in Haran with only one thing in his pockets: business cards. He was trying to get more students in order to be able to pay his rent. Rahim Aldemir was literally about to leave for what looks like Arizona, bags packed, when the outbreak hit Haran. His older sister Jade is very protective of him, and as a result he isn't allowed to go out on missions in the city, which is why he was so keen to go and blow up the volatile hive, as he started to feel useless. Instead, Rahim trains up new runners in the obstacle course on top of the tower. Jade, or the Scorpion on the other hand, was a champion kickboxer in Haran, but not much else is known about Jade prior to the outbreak. Kareem, a native of Haran, was, as mentioned before, a driver and bodyguard for the provincial governor of Haran, Errol Hassani. Also mentioned earlier in the video, Errol was bitten and Kareem made the choice to take him to a doctor who chopped off the infected limb, saving his life. Errol, for some reason, was furious at Kareem, so they parted ways. Kareem then fell in with Rice's gang, becoming his quartermaster, listening out for the incoming airdrops from the GRE. He is a man who, despite being part of such a brutal gang, does show a compassionate and merciful side to him, as he ends up helping Kyle a few times. So a new chapter is about to unfold in the Dying Light saga, with the sequel only a few weeks away. Obviously there's no Kyle Crane as far as we know. The protagonist this time around is a man called Aidan Caldwell. The events of Dying Light 2 will take place 15 years after those of Dying Light, and take place in a city that is known only as the City, located somewhere in Europe. We've had it confirmed by devs that Aidan does seem to have something superhuman about his abilities due to experiments on him when he was a child. Could these have been similar to the military experiments earlier on in Dying Light? But anyway, that is it for this video. If you're as excited as I am for Dying Light 2, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Also, comment your own theories down below. Subscribe if you aren't already. I will be doing a playthrough of Dying Light 2 on my other channel, so go and subscribe to that one too. But for now guys, take care, and I will see you in the next one.